All right. Welcome to the first episode of the Merrifield Sportsbook Show. Let's get something out of the way very quick. This is a fictitious sportsbook. This is not real. We're not getting in a Notre Dame swimming and diving situation where we're creating a fake sportsbook, taking bets on things. That's none of that. This is just a sportsbook by name. Welcome in. I'm, of course, Nick Burt. Joining me is the rest of the gambling committee. This has started as a small group chat, which then evolved into a Twitter, which has now evolved into this show. We, of course, have Matt Merrifield, whose name is on this sports book. We have Jay DeCoster and Jay Walsh. That is, of course, Justin Walsh, but we do call him Jay Walsh. So I figured we will just kind of give a brief explanation of who each of us are. So I'll let the namesake of this sports book, Matt Merrifield, go first.
Yeah, just for a quick reintroduction of the Merrifield Sportsbook, it started as a sponsorship for a IM soccer team that never actually started. But when we were discussing the starting of an intramural soccer team here at Michigan State, 3 of the 4 members of the show are graduates. I will be in like 8 months. Every great soccer team has to have a sponsorship, and what better way than to come up with your own company? I don't know if we even count as a real sportsbook because we make the bets instead of like allowing people to place them. We're working on it. Not really. We'll see. But yeah, I'm Matt. I work for Impact at Michigan State, Shout Out Broadcasting. I think all of us are J School graduates other than JDC, which is a crime. But I think that sports betting is an important issue in the sports landscape, and guiding people through these tough and narrow waters in this unknown world of college football is a blast and should be discussed.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, Matt. Jay, let's introduce yourself because you are the most recent graduate from Michigan State here on this show.
Yes, I am. My name is Jay DeCoster, recent graduate of Michigan State. In the work world now, and just enjoying the alumni life every day. And excited to get started with this first episode. So let's get it.
Justin Walsh, you are the oldest graduate on this show, I believe, because you graduated the winter fall semester, I think, of 22, correct? Or 23,
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, sir. Fall 2022, graduated, as Mr. Merrifield said, graduated from MSU J School. Let's go. And Merrifield likes to talk about how old I am all the time, so I'll take the oldest member of the committee title and run with it. So excited to get this going. Let's do it.
And then I feel like I don't really need an introduction, but J School alum, just like Jay Walsh, soon to be Matt too. But this is going to be broadcast as you are seeing this on the Nick Burt Sports Network. So you've seen a lot of me. So I don't feel like I need more of an introduction. But what does need an introduction is the 2024 college football season. Now, it technically did already get underway last weekend with week 0. But we had 4 games, and truly, they ended up being entertaining, but the actual teams playing weren't outstanding. So that's kind of why we're starting with week 1. It feels like more of a starting position for this season. Of course, this is a season of big change. Realignment has very much shaken the college football world. And we are starting to get in this realignment just era. What are each of your guys feeling now that we're finally headed into all of this?
I guess I'll start. I mean, look, realignment is it's tough. It's a different landscape. I mean, you're seeing the Big Ten expand to 18 teams now. You're seeing the ACC. You feel like a lot of these teams are just leaving the ACC now. The Pac-12's gone. The SEC is turning into a juggernaut with Texas and Oklahoma now. It's a different landscape now. We call it the Power Four now. It's an adjustment period for college football. And I mean, like it or not, we're still going to be watching. We're all diehard college football fans. I would say that for myself. And no more Pac-12. You're just going to have to adjust, I would say. So,
I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's definitely going to be different. Seeing UCLA and Rutgers playing in a conference game is definitely going to be an interesting interesting thing moving forward. But it's, some people think that it's going to be really bad for college athletics. Who's really to say what the overall impact is going to be? It's just going to be something that's interesting moving forward, and at the very least, it makes the college football season definitely a little more interesting with all the big time games that could be played as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have two runaway trains in college sports right now. We have obviously the conferences trying to make as much money as possible, and then the athletes themselves trying to make as much money as possible with NIL. And I feel like a lot of people are putting the blame on NIL for just the conferences themselves being greedy. But I feel like the only conference that'll look and feel different, obviously besides the Pac-12 no longer existing, RIP, Pac-12 after dark, is the Big Ten. Like UCLA and Rutgers just doesn't make sense. But having Colorado take on I guess Arizona was in the Pac-12, but Colorado and Kansas State feels like, I mean, Colorado used to be in the Big 12, so we're kind of getting teams that kind of feel in the Big 12, feel natural. Texas and Oklahoma still fit right in the SEC as those known programs, established, powerful programs. And, I mean, the ACC is kind of second fiddle, and we're seeing that with SMU and Stanford joining. But I feel like the Big 10 is the only one that feels out of place, going from 14 to 18, and also adding 4 schools that really don't fit the vibe of the Big 10 identity.
And you do mention that, like, kind of Big Ten identity. It does feel like it's somewhat being lost with these additions. But then I think another good point was made that, like, with these additions to the conferences, like, yes, it basically came at, the death of the Pac-12, but we're starting to get some like major like games in conference. So it's going to also be interesting to see if that, changes tune of out of conference games in coming years. Like, we also have the expanded playoff this upcoming year and in future years to come. Will teams be, more lenient to not playing those big time non-conference games because A, they have those in conference now, and B, because it's now an expanded playoff? Why would you waste your opportunities, early on in the season when could pay off later in the year? So I figured we can start this off before we get into week 1 games, just by kind of giving a quick prediction on who you think is going to win each conference. We got some predictions here. So we'll do the big 4, the power 4, whatever you want to call it. We'll pick a group of 5 playoff team, your biggest surprise team of the season, your biggest disappointment, and then your Heisman winner. And then we'll get into like national champion and national title game stuff. So let's start off with the ACC. As mentioned, 3 new additions this year: Cal, Stanford, and SMU. None of those really fit in a conference that's named after the Atlantic coast, but here we are. So we'll start off with you, Jay. Who do you think is going to win this newly expanded ACC this year?
The U. Miami is winning the ACC. You got Cam Ward from Washington State, Damian Martinez from Oregon State, Simeon Barrow, former Spartan. It's gonna really help out the defensive line. I just really like the U this year. Clemson's going to be a very popular pick, but it's also Dabo. I feel like just Clemson's becoming just a very stale program in the last couple of years. And I know Miami, look, they've disappointed the last few years. I think this is the year they can get it done. I know Mario Cristobal they struggled last year, but I think this is the year they can get it done. I really like Cam Ward is kind of the main reason why. So,
Jay Walsh, what about you?
Respectfully, JDC, I will never bet on Miami. I believe that they are fraudulent pretty much always, and Mario Cristobal is renowned for his excellent coaching abilities, especially late in game. So I am going to go with North Carolina State here, which I know they are kind of another team that people try to buy into the hype of every single year, but I really look at the ACC as kind of wide open this year because I really don't think Clemson is all that. Obviously, we saw what Florida State just did in Ireland, and I think North Carolina State is probably the team that can take advantage of it most. They've got an experienced guy coming in at quarterback with Grayson McCall, and I just think that this is the year that they get it done.
I would have to agree, Jay Walsh. You stole my thunder. Grayson McCall, I've been a huge huge fan of at Coastal. Jordan Waters coming over from Duke. They return Kevin Concepcion, the sophomore receiver. The only thing that worries me, they go to Clemson, they go to Georgia Tech, they go to UNC. But I do like the Wolfpack a lot this year. I'm a little upset that you got to beat me to the punch there. I think UNC is going to be dangerous too, even though Drake May is gone. I think Omarion Waters, I think he's going to be really, really, or Omarion, I can't remember his last name. It's not, but anyways, UNC is going to be really strong as well. But NC State and the Wolfpack are going to win a really bad ACC. Miami stinks.
And Matt, you just kind of stole my thunder because my pick was North Carolina. I think, yes, they've lost a few key pieces this year, but it kind of feels like Mac Brown has built a win now type team. Obviously, he's not getting any younger. I think he wants at least one more conference title on his resume. Kind of feels like this is the year with the ACC being this wide open. I don't think there's anybody good. Mario Cristobal, very much a fraud. We kind of saw it at Oregon. We're seeing it again at Miami. Florida State, I think DJU is going to be the downfall of this team. We kind of saw that against Georgia Tech. And I think that schedule for NC State is going to hurt their chances. I think they'll drop a few games there, and then they'll still be a decent team, but they just won't be there in the end. So let's move on to the conference we are all familiar with, the Big Ten. Of course, all Michigan State grads. So we have some bias here, but I don't think any of us are actually picking our Spartans to win the conference this year. So let's just go around the table once again. Jay, we'll start with you. Who do you think is going to win the Big Ten?
I'm going to steal Matt's thunder here. Oregon is winning the Big Ten. Dylan Gabriel, the best quarterback in the portal. Great defense. I love the receiving unit. And I just don't trust Ryan Day to win the Big Ten. So I'm going to go with Oregon. If they can beat Ohio State in Autzen, I think they have a really good chance to run away with this thing here. And if they'll probably play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. I think they can get it done. I think Dan Lanning's built for the Big Ten. I know he hasn't really won anything yet, but I think this is the year he can get it done and add a ring to his resume. So,
Jay Walsh, what about you?
Yeah, there's
or Matt, either of you.
All right, Matt. JDC, you said you stole.
I don't have much to say on Oregon.
You love him.
JDC,
well,
you stole Matt's thunder there, but you kind of stole mine because I think the obvious pick here is to pick Oregon to win the Big Ten. Just simply because, it's clear in terms of talent, it's clearly Oregon and Ohio State and then everybody else in the Big Ten. And I think Oregon has the clear advantage in both the quarterback and the head coach battle in that matchup. And as you said, Jay, the key is they play Ohio State at home this year. So I think that's a huge thing for them. And obviously anything can happen in the Big Ten championship game, but I think that the quarterback and the head coach advantage will be big enough to help them get the job done.
All right, Matt, what about you? You picking the Ducks to win the Big Ten also?
So I am going with the Ducks. I'm going to provide a little bit of a counter to both your guys' points, because I do think the Ducks are going to make it to the Big Ten championship game. They take care of Ohio State at Autzen. That puts Ohio State in a really tough spot to even make it to Indy, because I think the team that could win the Big Ten is Penn State. I really like their chances more than people give them credit for, because their schedule isn't tough enough. They can lose to Ohio State and still make it. They have that. They have the luxury of losing their most important game and still getting there, which they haven't had that before. And then one game in Indianapolis, they can beat Oregon. They could beat them. Their defense is good enough. Is Drew Aller any good? We don't know. Can he be worse than last year? We don't know. I hate using that argument. You can't be any worse, because you can be. And I've seen it way too many times with Michigan State secondary. But I am picking the Ducks, but I think Penn State, this is a year that they could take advantage of an expanded Big Ten.
And all three of you guys have made kind of a similar point to what I'm going to make here. I do believe Oregon is going to win at home against Ohio State at Autzen. It is hard to go into Autzen and win a game. Ask 2014 Michigan State that. Ask basically any Pac-12 team the past decade. The thing is, it's hard to beat a team twice, which is why I think Ohio State ends up winning the Big Ten. I think they both meet up again in Indianapolis. And I think, having that game on film already, kind of knowing what Oregon is somewhat going to do, obviously, they'll probably change things up in a title game. But I think Ohio State finds a way to win the Big Ten and find their way to a first round bye in the college football playoff. Let's move on to, I think, the more interesting of conferences with this realignment, because it feels like they've added pieces that make the conference more interesting, as that is the Big 12. They add, I know Matt loves Arizona. I think they're going to be a very interesting team in the Big 12. Obviously, you have the Deion Sanders train, which we'll get into in a few here. But, Jay, who do you have winning the Big 12?
I got Utah, and that's just because, look, Cam Rising, who's 40 years old and he's got a mortgage, he's got 4 kids. He's back for his 10th year of college football. Great roster, and I'm looking at their schedule, and their only tough game they really have is going to Oklahoma State. It's on September 21st. Oklahoma State's a really good team. You host Arizona, and obviously it's tough. It's tough to play in Utah, so you have that game at home. And then the only other tough road game is you're going to UCF. So UCF's a sneaky good team. I think they're going to cause a lot of Big 12 teams some problems this year. But I got Utah. I think they take care of business in the Big 12. Kansas State's up there. I think they're going to be a pretty popular pick too, but I'm going to roll with the Utes.
JDC, I don't know who sent you a picture of my notes because you're taking all my picks here, but I am also going with Utah, and on the risk of repeating what JDC just said, Cam Rising, collecting Social Security, but still somehow in college. That's a big advantage for them, having the experience at quarterback. Utah, year in and year out, Utah is a tough team. They are a team that nobody wants to play, and as JDC said, they've got a fairly favorable schedule this year. So I think Utah is the team to beat in the Big 12.
I unfortunately disagree with both of you because if your starting quarterback is older than Jay Walsh, you aren't a very good football team. So that applies to Utah, and that applies to Oklahoma State and probably a couple other teams in this conference and around college football. But I believe that if you have a 7th-year player or an 8th-year player, for the love of God, you are not a good football team. If at that point you are not moved on, you are not a very good football player. My pick, I have a tough decision to make because I have been very strong advocate for Arizona. But I think UCF actually has the better path, and I think they're the better team on paper. I think Arizona's schedule is slightly easier. Arizona has to play at UCF, at Utah. That's it. They play home against West Virginia. I think it's going to be tough. UCF has to go to West Virginia, to Iowa State, and then host Utah and Arizona. So it's tough. I love Noah Fafita. I love McMillan. It's a great duo, maybe the best in the country. But KJ Jefferson and that Gus Malzahn offense is going to be dangerous. So I am going to go with UCF. I think they're a very good, sneaky team. A lot of experienced players, a lot of juniors and seniors on the defense and on the offensive line. And when you have Cam Newton light, as much as I hate Cam Newton comparisons, shout out the Colts, I think this works in this situation. So UCF.
Shout out Joe Milton.
And I somewhat agree with Matt there. I think UCF has at least one of the easier paths to get to the title game. I think they end up there. I expect a big season from KJ Jefferson, but I do think it ends up being Utah walking away with the Big 12 title, mostly because of the reasons that have already been stated. So we move on to the last of the Power Four conferences, and that is the SEC. The additions of Texas and Oklahoma make it just mean more now in Texas and Oklahoma. So, Jay, who do you have winning this SEC?
See, I was debating between Georgia and Ole Miss. Georgia has a really tough schedule. They have to go to Bama. They have to go to Texas. And Ole Miss is also very interesting. because they have a lighter schedule. I'm gonna roll with Georgia though. I think they're on a revenge tour after what happened to them last year. I think this loaded team, Carson Beck, give me a Heisman candidate, just a loaded roster, best offensive line in the country. Very, very tough schedule, but I think Georgia's on their revenge tour this year, so I'm gonna roll with the Dogs.
Thank you for not taking another one of my picks. I am going with Texas to win the SEC this year. I took a look at their schedule, and honestly, I mean, JDC talked about Georgia travels to Texas this year, which is a huge thing. They play at Michigan the second game of the year, which who knows how good Michigan's going to be after losing basically their entire team. So that I'm counting that one as a Texas win for now. Obviously remains to be seen, but aside from that, they really don't have another difficult road game on the schedule. They play at Texas A&M final game of the season, but I mean, it's Texas A&M, so they're frauds. And then they play Oklahoma at home the week before they play Georgia. So they have back-to-back home games of Oklahoma and Georgia. I do think they lose one of those games, but I think they still will have enough quality wins on their schedule, and I think they've got the talent to get to the SEC championship game, and I think they can win it.
Georgia. Next question.
For me,
I got
oh, okay. For me, it came down to two teams, and it's between Georgia and Missouri. A lot of people are buying into this Missouri hype train. I somewhat buy into it, and then I looked at their schedule, and that kind of got me more on it than not. I mean, they go to Alabama, and then they're at home against Oklahoma. I feel like those are their two big games of the year, and they have a bye week in between those two. But that also includes their game in mid-October when they traveled to Amherst to face off against UMass. Whoever scheduled that is just brilliant. But I do think Georgia ends up winning this conference. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Missouri in the title game in Atlanta. So let's move on. Who do you guys think is going to be the group of five, or I guess technically six if you include the Pac-2 left? Who do you think will be the representative for them in the playoff, and most likely the number 12 seed?
I'm going to go with Liberty Bibberty, or Boise State's going to be a close second, but I'm going to roll with Liberty.
I am also going with Liberty. It's the easy pick just because, I mean, it feels like they go undefeated or close to it every single year because they just steamroll through Conference USA. And they have the schedule to get to the end of the season undefeated. And I think an undefeated Liberty absolutely gets put in the playoff.
I am going to roll with an American Conference team. We're going with the Memphis Tigers. They won 10 games last year, including beating Iowa State. They played Missouri tough last year. Their 3 losses were to Missouri by 7. They lost to SMU. They lost to Tulane. They returned Seth Hennigan, their quarterback, who's really good, threw for almost 4,000 yards last year. They added talent in the portal, and they get an opportunity to go to Florida State, I believe at the end of September or in early October. I know Florida State's not that great, as we just found out, but still winning on the road at one of the toughest environments in college football, that's going to do wonders for them. I think they could even lose a game in conference play, go 12-1, especially if they win that game at Florida State, and that would put them in over a Liberty team. I feel like it would have to.
The only thing that has me picking Liberty is the schedule. It is an absolute just disaster of football. I mean, it's Campbell at New Mexico State, UTEP, East Carolina, at Appalachian State, FIU at Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, at Middle Tennessee, at UMass, Western Kentucky, and closing out at Sam Houston. The toughest game they play is what? East Carolina, probably. Maybe Appalachian State. They're going to go undefeated. I think even if Memphis is, 12-1, there may be a conversation there that Memphis might get in. I just don't see them doing that. Kind of ends up being like the New Year's Six Bowl last year, where it kind of felt like Liberty lost it in the end, even though being undefeated. And they still ended up in that bowl and got smacked by Bo Nix's Oregon Ducks in the Fiesta Bowl. So, guys, who's going to be the biggest surprise team this year in college football?
I'm going to go, this is a very casual pick, but I'm going to go with Virginia Tech. Because Matt, get your grin off that face because Kyron Jones, I think he could take a pretty big leap. And if he does take that leap, I mean, look out. I'm looking at the schedule. I mean, you got Old Dominion, Rutgers. You go to Miami, which is a tough game. Stanford, Boston College, but the game that I'm circling right now is you host Clemson. And that game it's a night game. I mean, that's one of the Lane Stadium is one of the toughest places to play. So if you can get that done, Virginia Tech's going to be a very, very tough out. So like I said, if Kyron Jones can take that next step at quarterback, they could be pretty dangerous.
My surprise pick for the season is the Texas State Bobcats. I think so. They are coming off an 8-5 season last year in the Sun Belt, and I think they are only getting better. They bring back their star running back, I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ismail Mahdi. Dude ran for over 1,300 yards after not starting the first 3 games of the season. And they bring in transfer quarterback. They bring Jordan McLeod from James Madison last year, who led James Madison to a fantastic season. Go Dukes. So that coupled with the fact that they have an unbelievably easy schedule. They play Arizona State at home in the 3rd game of the season. And outside of that, their hardest game is probably at South Alabama in the last game of the season. And even that, I think, is going to be a cakewalk for them. I would be shocked if Texas State wins less than 10 games this regular season.
The team I think is going to surprise some people is they are ranked in the top 15, but I don't feel like they're getting talked about enough in their loaded conference. That's the Tennessee Volunteers. I think Nico Iomaleva is a real quarterback that can actually run an offense, and we saw what Hendon Hooker did, and he's a solid quarterback. We saw what Joe Milton happened with Joe Milton last year, and that team still found a way to win 10 games. So now you add in a high-level, maybe the best quarterback from 2 years ago from the recruiting class, because Malachi Nelson appears to stink. Can't even win the job at Boise. So from that standpoint, I think Tennessee's got the talent. They now have a strong quarterback, their most talented quarterback they've had since maybe Peyton Manning.
Joe Milton.
And I think this is a recipe. I think this is a recipe for success for Tennessee. I don't think their schedule is that difficult. I think they're going to catch some teams by surprise a little bit. I think they beat Alabama, especially at home. And this is a team I think makes the college football playoff.
And then I think surprise team of the year is coming from the Big Ten, and that is the Indiana Hoosiers. I think the first year under head coach Kurt Cignetti, formerly of the James Madison Dukes, they got in transfer quarterback Curtis O'Rourke from Ohio. Of course, his brother is back in the CFL. Just had to get the CFL mentioned here. But their schedule, very easy up until the last 3 weeks of the year when they face Michigan and then go to the Horseshoe to face Ohio State and close out with Purdue. But, I mean, it's FIU, Western Illinois, at UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland. And then you go to Northwestern, Nebraska, a Washington team coming into Bloomington. That's going to be interesting. And then you go to Michigan State before playing that Michigan game. I think Indiana has a chance to win 8 or 9 games this year, just given how bad their schedule seems to be. So let's go the opposite side of surprise. Who do you think is going to be your biggest disappointment this year?
I got Kansas simply because I think losing offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki to Penn State is a big loss. I think he really made Jalen Daniels special last year, and that's how good they were last year. And also, I mean, this could be a reason or not, but their stadium is undergoing a massive renovation right now, and they're playing all their games at Arrowhead. So that doesn't really mean that they're going to have a home field advantage. And I'm just looking at their schedule. you go to West Virginia, you go to Kansas State, and the Sunflower game. I think that's how you say it. You host Iowa State. Iowa State's not a great team, but still that schedule is very, very tough. So I'm gonna say Kansas disappoints this year.
My disappointment pick, it's kind of what I think of as the easy pick, but it's the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are obviously the first season in the post Nick Saban era is going to be very interesting. I am not a 100% believer in Jalen Milroe. I think he's a decent level quarterback. I don't think he's anything super special. The main reason why I have Alabama as my disappointing pick is their schedule this season is brutal. Third week of the season, they travel to Wisconsin to play the Badgers. Then the next week, they have Georgia. Then they have a 3-week stretch later in the season where they play at Tennessee, Missouri at home, and then at LSU. And then second to last game of the season, they play at Oklahoma. I would be very unsurprised to see Alabama go 8-4 this year. And I think people giving them the number 5 ranking going into the season is completely ridiculous. So I am picking Alabama as my biggest disappointment.
Jay Walsh, I like that you said Alabama because I do agree. And now I don't have to pick them. I don't like Jalen Milroe. I think DeBoer is a really good coach, but taking over Nick Saban is an impossible job, and he doesn't have a quarterback like Michael Penix or Jake Haener to fill that role. Milroe's not that type of quarterback. But if he made the adjustments in the offseason, we'll see. So I reserve my judgment for Alabama after week 1. My disappointing team is in the SEC, though. It's LSU. I think they beat USC week 1, but they have to play Ole Miss. They have to go to A&M. They do have to play Alabama. Then they have to go to the Swamp, and they also play Oklahoma. They have to replace Jaden Daniels, Garrett Nussmeier. I'm not a huge fan of at quarterback. They have to replace some of their weapons on the outside. Malik Neighbors is gone. I'm not a huge Brian Kelly. As much as I thought he was good at Notre Dame, I don't think he's a fit for LSU. And I can see them going 7-5 real easy, 8-4.
And my biggest disappointment is going to be a team that was actually mentioned earlier as a conference champion for some people here, and that is the U, Miami. I think them being ranked in the first place is just blasphemous. I don't think they should be in the top 20 of the AP poll right now. I think they we'll get into that game. I think they lose this weekend at the Swamp. I think then that kind of just slowly, just falls apart their season. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose to South Florida. South Florida is a very good team this year. You still got Florida State on there. You have a Georgia Tech team that looks really good. I believe they are at home against Virginia Tech, so that is not at Lane Stadium, but I still wouldn't be surprised if they lose that. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami goes 6-6 or 7-5 this year. So given that, let's move into who do you think is going to win the Heisman this year?
I got Carson Beck. Georgia's gonna, like I said, on that revenge tour. I think Carson Beck can do it. I think Dylan Gabriel's the favorite right now, but Carson Beck's right behind him. Carson Beck's got all the talent in the world. He's got all the weapons around him. So yeah, give me Carson Beck from the Dogs.
I know it's the favorite pick, but it's hard to pick against Dylan Gabriel. I mean, the Oregon offense the last several years has been absolutely dynamic, and Gabriel is one of the more talented quarterbacks in college football right now. And under that offense with Dan Lanning, he is going to absolutely flourish. I mean, I would be very unsurprised to see him throw upwards of 4,500 yards this year, and he's going to put up some numbers. So I am going with the easy pick in Dylan Gabriel.
I feel like this year we have a lot of guys are being talked about: Beck, Gabriel, Milroe, Ewers, but I don't love any of them. I'm going to go with Noah Fafita. I'm going to double down on my Arizona take. I think he is the type of player that would come out of nowhere from a small school. He is undersized, but he's very mobile, dual threat, got a cannon of an arm. He's Kyler Murray-esque, and he's got the wide receiver to do it with that tandem with McMillan. And I think a team that could surprise some people in a conference that is going to have a lot of eyes on it because nobody knows what's going to happen every week. You have to tune into the Big 12. So I'm going to go with Fafita, and I don't have the odds in front of me right now, but for value pick as well. So, because this is a gambling podcast, remember that.
And then I guess I'll close it out. Me and Jay Walsh kind of on the same wavelength here. It kind of feels weird taking the favorite, but just given how this Oregon offense has run the past few years, I know some people on this podcast would argue the Oregon quarterback from last year probably should have won the Heisman. But I think this is the year another Oregon quarterback wins the Heisman. I do think it is Dylan Gabriel. So let's get into your national title game predictions and your national champion. Let's start off with you, Jay.
I got Oregon versus Georgia in the national title game, and Georgia takes it home.
I have Oregon, but I have Texas in the national title game. I'm a big believer in Texas and Quinn Ewers, but I think Oregon gets the job done. I think they finally end the no championship drought in Eugene, and I think Oregon takes it home.
I think things are going to get weird this year in this playoff. I think it is going to be Oregon taking it home. I really don't know who they're going to play in that national title game. I feel like it's going to be a non-conference champion, which leads me to lean towards Texas. But I'm not really sure. I really don't know. I think Texas and Georgia. But I think I could see Ohio State, Oregon national championship for a rematch. So that was a really good non-answer. I apologize.
I have same as JDC. I have an Oregon Georgia national championship, but I do think Dan Lanning's team is just. It feels like they're built to win this year. We're kind of forgetting about future years. It's win now, especially for Phil Knight, because he's just throwing money at this team. I think Oregon ends up winning the national title this season.